God bless everybody. Today it is March 3rd of 2023. And what we're going to do today, I'm going to do a Middle East update in the next few days. But I'm seeing a trend on some charts, and I wanted to bring this to your attention. I think it's extremely important that we have a Fed decision on March 22nd on how fast and how hard he's going to raise these rates. Um, and I can see that we're moving a certain way in the charts, and I wanted to bring this to your attention. So about a year ago, I started posting these videos on Bitcoin and how I saw this downtrend in the market, how I thought it was we were going through this Wyckoff movement, and we would end up at a certain point um, at a low end on Dogecoin and Bitcoin, and that we would hit a certain level. And we did actually hit those levels. Now I know, in a lot of times people want instantaneous gratification, and these charts move a certain way. And like I said, as I explained in these charts over a year ago, that as the Fed manipulates the markets, this extends out, and so there's a time discrepancy on when these crashes and these types of movements actually occur. And I can give you a window a lot of times, but they extend out because every time these rates change and the Fed increases or decreases or manipulates the markets, this changes the trajectory of where this is headed. So when I made this video, I saw and have been talking about for some time, a few months, that Bitcoin was in a downtrend, that it has been trending downwards and still is. If you go into this video that I did on July 17th of 2021, so we're a year and a half later, okay? But look what happened. So at this time, um, and I can go look at these charts, we could see, I said we could see Bitcoin drop from an all-time high of 63,000, 2950, and that it could potentially drop to below 10,000. Now it hasn't dropped below 10,000, but what I wanted to show you is this: Dogecoin did drop to potentially or below 8 cents. Okay, from a high of 74 cents on May 8th. So it took a year and a half for this thing to crap out and drop to 8 cents. Now, I said I didn't know exactly when that was going to happen, but we would see this occur, and when it did, it potentially would even drop more because we're not in the second leg yet, and that's what I said. So if this has dropped, if Doge has dropped to 8 cents, and right now Doge is about 7.5 cents, basically. This is not done yet, and the carnage is not over, and we're going to see this trajectory drop further. And if you draw a line, I know this is hard to do like this, but if you draw a line that comes down through here, and you draw another trench that comes down through here, you'll realize that we're in a downward trench. We've been in a downward trench for some time, and we're not moving north or up. So let's look at something else I think is extremely important in these charts. So if we move to Bitcoin, we were at 64 or so, 65,000. We're at 22,000 now. You can see that we're in a downward trend. And if you look at this chart, you'll realize if you go from this point to this point, and from, let's say, Oh, you can take it from a number of places, but let's say from this point to this point, you realize this is a downward trench. Okay, I draw all this out, but it just takes too long, and I think I can explain it so you get the point. So now realize we've come up a little, but if you go from here to here and here to here, you are still in a downward trench. Just as this went up, it dropped down. And this is a similar look as we have here. You can sort of see that here, and then it drops. And then you see an upward tick, and then it drops. Now, I'm seeing a massive drop potentially in the next few weeks, and so I wanted to bring this to your attention. So I've been talking about this extremely important process of what to look for in how Powell and the Fed is going to affect the markets and what he's doing and how he's chasing the 2 year bond. So this is an extremely important chart. And I'm one that believes that you can, as you can see from the past chart, you can predict what's coming in the future based on the trends of the markets. And one of the markets that I believe that you should watch is the bond market because the bond market is 3 times larger than the stock market. The bond market controls all the markets because the volume of liquidity within these markets dictates the other markets. So I want to show you something here. There is a trend. There's a trend moving up. And this is not a good trend because these are bond yields rate moving up, which is going to force inflation and interest rates up also. So if you look at this chart, it has a lot going on here. You got a federal fund rate, which is in the blue, and you can see Powell's been raising in incremental steps. And you can see how he's chasing this 2 year bond. Okay? The 2 year bond's in red. The 10 year bond is in yellow. And the 30 year bond is in blue. He's not chasing the 10 year bond. He's not chasing the 30 year bond. Powell has very few tools here other than to raise interest rates and to try to basically stop the employment so that we have a reduction in employment that forces the markets to slow down, which is what he's trying to get to happen. He's trying to get the markets to slow down, cause of pain, as he's indicated, which is forcing a lot of layoffs and things like that. And he's chasing this 2 year bond. And so I want to show you that if you look at this trend up and you draw a line that moves up this way and you draw another line, let's say, and you can take it from a number of different places, it's just a trend line. You can go from this point or this point. This probably be the point because I've got 3 yellow 10 year bond lower sections here. You could go with the red trend line, which, if we're using the bond rate, you could do that, but it doesn't matter which trend line you use. It does matter on the trajectory depending on how you lay it out. Let's say we use this yellow line or this red line, and you go from here to here, and you go forward. You're moving up, okay? So let's say if we use this trench of the 30 and come forward, or the 2 year bond and trench forward. So it creates a trough. That moves up, if you see what I'm saying. I'm not going to draw this out. What I'm seeing, though, is this. The 2 year bond right now is almost at 4.89%. Okay, that's almost 5%. and look where the the 10 and the 30 is at 4.5. Okay, so this inversion is extreme. Okay, you're talking about extreme inversion at this moment. So this inversion of the 2 and 10 year bond has increased dramatically in the last few months. We're almost at a zero.9 differential, a negative zero.9. This is unheard of. This and this is going to get worse. And I made a comment to a banker about a year ago, a local branch guy. He thought it was crazy that we would see a 100-point spread, and this would cause all kinds of problems with the markets. And so I was concerned the people, as we saw this carnage happening, and the banks have been bad players by putting people in this position, that we would see this 100-point spread, and we would start to see massive defaults in the subprime, auto, commercial, and real estate, um, and prime also, but subprime especially. And so this inversion is getting worse and worse, and you can see this trend is down, okay, which is bad because you don't want this inversion to get wider. So if we come back to this main chart, what I'm seeing is a trend that's moving the 2 year bond up, which is what the Fed is chasing. I've been talking about this for a while. And this is extremely important on what's coming up when he makes a decision on March 22nd, which is he's going to make another rate hike. Now, everybody's talking about the Fed pivot and how he's going to start to reduce rates and not move rates up, but he can't. He has to be hawkish. He has to move the rates forward because he's chasing this 2 year bond. And you notice this 2 year bond just spiked and the dollar strength went up. This is extremely important because now he thought he was getting close to it, but he made a comment just recently that he had to get to 6%. Why? Because the 2 year bond's spiking, and by the time he tries to catch this, because it takes months, they only raise interest rates, every month or two, usually every couple months. It's going to take him time to catch this. As the bond spikes forward here, it's going to hit 6%. But based on what I'm seeing on these charts, I'm seeing a low end trajectory of 6.1 to 7.5 as we move forward. And as this bends this way, it sounds funny, but the markets are bending the curve up north, so it's becoming more and more steep. As you can see, this is starting to spike and it's getting out of hand, and nothing's working. The unemployment numbers are still extremely low, and so Jay's plan of getting people to lose their jobs and creating pain is not working. Raising these interest rates to these levels of 4.5, 4.6 is not catching the 2 year bond, and so he has to keep moving up. He doesn't have a choice. So I'm projecting, and this is terrible because we've not seen this kind of carnage since like the early 70s. When we had that, the massive gas lines and all that back in the early 70s, that these bond rates, this 2 year bond, would go to 7 or 9%. 7 or 9%, okay? He's at 4, so that means that maybe Jay is only about halfway through his cycle of raising rates. And this is going to cause a problem because what I say is this. Jay had pivoted some. It's not what I call pivot. But he pivoted a little because he went from a .5 rate hike. He did like 4 of those to a .25, and then he was going to do a couple 2.5s. And then at the end of this year, he indicated that he was going to go and pause. That's not going to happen because he's got to catch this. And as this 2-year rate keeps moving up, he's got to move up with it. Now, I speculate, maybe I'm wrong, that on March 22nd, Jay's going to pivot the other way, and he's going to raise by .5 because he's losing this battle of gaining traction between the federal fund rate, which is in the blue, and the 2-year bond, which is in the red. And he's going to say, well, to catch this, because it's going to keep moving forward, he's got another 3 weeks almost before he gets there, and we don't know how much this bond is going to spike up. Now, it could come down, as you can see, but the trend is up. This is massively spiking right now, too, so I don't necessarily know that this is going to stop. And as you can see in that Bitcoin chart, this takes time to happen. So it'll go down, it goes up, goes down, goes up. But the trend is in bonds up. What that's going to cause is, as you can see, the 10 and the 30 years are moving up with it. Not to the same extent, and the inversion is getting wider and wider. As you can see, we were actually in pretty close there for a while, and then all of a sudden we started to gap out, okay? And you can see that gap out over here. You see a gap out, and then all of a sudden you start to see a raising. Well, this is a much heavier raise than we saw back here, and this is going to be more of a spiking. Excuse me. So how does this affect you? It affects you because if you have any kind of interest rates attached to credit cards, mortgages, auto loans, anything, you're going to pay more for them. And a lot of these banks, these small banks especially, not the larger banks as much, but these small predatory banks, and I know they're regional banks and they're supposed to be helping you because, you know, they give community money and they don't give it to them, they loan it to them, and then you get an interest. And they usually charge them more than a larger bank, and so they're predatory to begin with because they're telling you they have to survive even though they do extremely well, and it's amazing as they pay their dividends out. You know, they have to charge you these absorbent rates higher than the actual commercial bankers, larger commercial branch bankers. But what's happening is they're setting you up in a predatory 7-year balloon loan. Some of these banks only carry a 7-year ARM anymore. And if you go out and look at a 7-year ARM, that's for a low credit score person that has terrible credit, and it's risky, and so the bank loans them at 7-year loan at a higher rate, and in this case it's even worse because they're only using a 7-year loan, so they're placing everybody in the same playing field, but they're charging people different rates based on their credit scores. So, let's say I, have a terrible credit score, I'm going to get a higher rate of interest on my loan than, let's say, somebody that doesn't have a terrible credit score, but they're going to place us still on a 7-year loan. And if you're talking about a 30-year home, then you're redoing this loan 4 or 5 times before the maturity of this loan actually finishes within a 30-year gap. So let's say if you took a 30-year fixed loan out, you'd have a single rate that would never change. Now, if the rates went down, you could go back and refinance that. But in the 7-year loan, what they've done is they put you in a trap because every 7 years this thing's going to refinance. And as you can see, these rates keep moving up. And so you are getting hit with higher and higher rates as these rates move up. And as these rates move up into a potential 6, 7, 9, above 10, ooh, Above 10, can you imagine the pain if he's at 4.5? If these things spike and actually move up to a potential 7 to 10% gap, this could be devastating to the markets. And we're going to see a lot of massive fallout in these markets and in these subprime and prime mortgages, auto, and commercial properties and things. This pain is just starting. And if we have potentially a war in the Middle East coming up, and there's a lot of things going on there. I'm going to try to do a video um, in the next few days on that. I've got a lot going on right now, so I haven't been able to update you as much as I have been. But I saw this, and this chart scares me just because I know where it's heading, and we've not seen this in such a long time. It's been 4 decades or more, almost 50 years since we've seen any kind of carnage like this. But due to how bad this truly is, and you can go back in time, you can see this. This is the 80s, 70s, and 80s that I'm talking about. Look at the start of this chart here, okay? Look at the start of this chart, and you could be up in here before long. This was not unheard of, and it has happened in history in the past. And if you're talking about a 10% terminal rate or higher, the fallout is going to be devastating. So God bless everybody. Find the open door. Find Jesus. Get right with the Lord. Pay your debt off before this thing goes crazy. If you have credit card debt or you have loans or other things, try to pay them off. Don't put yourself in a bad position to where you don't have liquidity of money to be able to, buy food and stuff in this high inflationary environment. But do pay off your debt if possible, because these banks are going to literally rape you out here before long, and they're going to take your possessions, and they're going to look at you and tell you how they've done such a great job for you and everything, as they're taking, giving the keys to the repo man to basically go steal your car. And you signed a contract. You put yourself in this hole. If your average car auto loan right now is $777 a month, with people paying over $1,000 a payment on a car. And their other car that they took in was underwater to begin with in a lot of cases. The banks have been bad players, and they have allowed a lot of this to happen when they could have not. And so I blame a lot of the banks for their bad practices. And the worst part about it is the more entrenched you get, the more they open your credit lines and entrench you even more. So finally you just fail, and a lot of times you just end up in a really bad place. So the best place to be is not a slave to the banks or the systems, and to get off the system. And the only way to do that is to pay off your debt and be debt free. Don't have credit cards. If you don't have cash, you really don't need it. And if you do need it, then sometimes you have to go to the extreme and get a loan and things like that. And I understand everybody's situation is different. But realize right now we're in an environment that's going to get more and more hostile. So the more and more you entrench yourself right now, the worse it's going to be for you later. So just keep an eye on all this. The bond rate does dictate the markets, and I suspect you're going to start to hear a .5 interest rate hike pivot, which is the other way, the way they don't want it to, and this will tank the markets. I could see a potential 30% leg down once they realize Powell is not going to pivot to reduce. He's going to get hawkish, and he's going to increase these rates. God bless everybody. Have a great night.